Hello. Welcome to lesson number 2 in 6 power habits of top HVAC companies. We'll begin to look at success habit number 1, which is key performance indicators. The top performing companies follow a clear set of measurable metrics that lead to continued success. Now, when we talk about key performance indicators, they're really measuring areas that are critical for the company to succeed. This is a combination of industry best practices, but also customizing these for every size company and every size team. Why are KPIs important? They allow you to accurately evaluate, adjust, and train most effectively. Most contractors train regularly, but it tends to be random and general. KPIs allow you to produce KTIs. KTIs stands for key training indicators, and those are very important. It helps us to be far more strategic and targeted with our training. Let's look at an example. If employee performance is low, ask them to describe what should have happened in a particular scenario. If they do so inaccurately, you have just discovered the problem because they clearly did not understand what their role or objective was. However, if they pretty well tell you correctly what should have happened, the next question to ask is, okay, what impeded the execution? What happened? Why did that not take place? Do they need something that they don't have? Is there an objection they're struggling to overcome? Do they need more situational training? A big success key is to be specific with these KPIs across the departments of the company. A departmental view allows you to see the most accurate picture of the company. Now, small companies often will say, well, Patrick, we don't have departments. The same 3 guys are going to do everything. Well, that's not really the definition of a department. Any area of the company, 5% or more of gross sales is considered a department, or perhaps if it has its own unique hourly rate. Setting up key performance indicators by department provides the most accurate snapshot of the company. For example, this tends to be the most common company view. We call it the bucket view. You have your sales, cost of materials, cost of labor, fixed and variable overhead, and our net profit displayed. Now, this is the most common view, but this is the most accurate view, breaking it down and looking at the company by department. Notice that service had profit of $80,000. New construction, these brackets mean that we are losing $20,000 in new construction. Retrofit has $90,000 of profit dollars. So yes, when I put it all together, I have $150,000 of profit. But this is far more descriptive than what we saw in the first example. Now, how long would it take the company owner to discover this if he's not looking at it or she's not looking at it through the departmental lens? Now, when you see this, especially if you begin to see this happen on a regular basis, what would the temptation be? You would say, well, man, how much more profitable could we be if we eliminate this department? When you feel that temptation, you have to stop. You don't have enough information to make that decision yet. Even if a department proves to be unprofitable, do not automatically eliminate it until you know why. Having the departmental view of the company sets your departments up side by side. Now, if I look at new construction, if I eliminate this department, what goes away? Well, a good many of these categories would indeed vanish if the department is no longer active. However, there's $48,000 of general overhead that is assigned to this department. That means even if this department goes away, that general overhead has to be absorbed by the remaining departments. Watch what happens to this general overhead when this department goes away. In 3, 2, 1, there it is. Now, all of a sudden, the entire company is operating in the negative. Without this view, the typical contractor would be at a loss as to how that would happen. The departmental view of the company is without question not only the most accurate, but it is the most healthy way to see what is going on inside the company. When you develop key performance indicators, you want to display them to the team. One of the worst things that can happen is to go to the trouble of setting up a list of KPIs, and when you're done, just put it in a drawer somewhere. If people don't see them, then there's no value and there's no hope of achieving those particular items. So the team needs to see them in the training room, the CSR area, the sales area, service. Customize that for your situation. You want your culture, your goals, your next steps to be on display so that as people, your team in particular, are moving through the facility, they see your values and your vision displayed every single day. Let's take a look at how key performance indicators empowers the team and informs the leaders. We had a KPI board placed in a service area with a company displaying the goal for maintenance agreement sales. Now, the owner was absolutely positive who would win this contest. He thought it would be the 2 veteran technicians of the company. Time passes. We did the evaluation. KPIs were tracked. And ironically, it was the 2 newer technicians that excelled in selling maintenance agreements to customers. Now, the owner was shocked. In fact, he goes to the 2 seasoned veterans and said, guys, I told them that you were going to win hands down. You did terrible with this. And he had known these guys for a long time, but he was about to hear something that he had never heard before. Both of the seasoned technicians say to the owner, well, we don't like selling maintenance agreements. Heck, we don't like doing maintenance. So yeah, we didn't really get motivated to sell it. That's the first time he had heard those words, and he had known those texts for a number of years. That opened the door for training to take place that otherwise would not have occurred. The end result, the total number of maintenance agreement sales went up for the whole team, and the owner learned a valuable lesson. It is so easy to miss rising stars in the company without these metrics in place. So in developing key performance indicators, here's the formula to help you do it effectively. Number 1, you have to determine what you are measuring. It could be percentage of sales growth, new client acquisition, percentage of deals that are financed. Literally, anything critical to the success of the company you want to capture as a KPI. Number 2, what is the target that you are trying to reach? Be specific. Avoid generalization. For example, more sales. That is not a realistic goal. More profit, more clients. That's too general. Everybody wants more sales. Everyone wants more profit, and everybody wants more clients. There's a conspicuous absence of details. You want your sales to increase by 20% this year compared to last year. Now we can develop a plan. We want profits to increase by 8% this year. Okay, now we have a heading. What are the steps to make that happen? We want to add, 10% to our client base this year. Now we have a specific number that we can begin to design around. Number 3, what is the source of the KPI data? Which department is involved and who is responsible for the data? Be clear on where the information is coming from and who is tasked to monitor and report the data. Number 4, what is the frequency of reporting? Some of the KPI data will be reviewed weekly, some will be monthly, some will be quarterly, and so on. The clearer you are in setting these up, the more likely you are to achieve these particular goals. So we're going to guide you through now several key performance indicators. Now, some of these are a combination of industry averages, more specific data. What you will want to do is view these items with a lens of how you can make it particular to your particular company and your particular team. Callback percentage is definitely an area that you have to watch because it erodes profitability significantly. Excessive callbacks will greatly undermine the success of your company. Because of mass production, roughly 2% of all parts potentially will fail. So the KPI target in this particular area would be 3% or less. If at your company you're exceeding that 3% mark, you have to ask, is it a part failure problem? Is it a technician or installation problem? What is the real reason that it's higher? Now, if you don't know what that is for your company, that's assignment number one. Find out what the callback percentage is, then drill into why it's happening so you can effectively manage this critical area. How about technician closing percentage on general service calls? The goal is to produce revenue beyond the diagnostic or trip charge fee to get you out there. The target would be 90% of the time or more, we want to be generating revenue beyond the diagnostic fee that's collected. If the numbers at your company are significantly under this percentage, we need to drill in why. We got to find out what's going on. How is the call being set up? How is the call being conducted that could be leading to lower numbers? First time completion percentage. If the technician is properly trained, the vehicle is properly stocked, and the required manpower is sent, 95 out of 100 calls should be completed the first time. What is it costing the company when the job is not completed on the first trip? Well, that job may have just become unprofitable. Lost time could be spent or could have been spent doing another repair. The office has become inefficient. Now they're rescheduling other clients, and customers are not happy because, if a domino drops at the beginning of the day, it literally backs everything up downstream. If the job was not completed on the first trip, again, we have to know why. Is it a lack of parts? Is it a lack of technical expertise? Is the manpower that we sent, were there too few, or was the wrong person sent to the job that they're not equipped to do that particular type of work? Customer no-shows. That happens a lot where there's a miscommunication between the scheduling office and the homeowner. So you always want to know on all of these what's going on and drill into the data so that you can correct it accurately. So CSR and technician coaching often are required if completion percentages are too low. Again, do they need something they don't have? That could be uncovered in your conversation with them. Is there an affordability issue taking place? How is the call being presented to the customer? Is the right person being sent to the job? Do they think you are too expensive? Now, this could be either the customer or many times your own team member. If a team member is struggling to, have repairs that are closed, or if they're presenting product, if that's low, many times one of the reasons is they are questioning whether the product or service is worth that amount. You may not know that, and opening a door for having a good discussion can help coach this particular employee on the value that your company will bring. All employees of the company have to be continuously sold on the company and the value that you bring to represent the company well. What about a KPI in regard to maintenance agreement sales? Now, for years, the target was 25 to 30% of the customers that would be seen in the course of a year would purchase a maintenance agreement. I can tell you that the highest performers in the industry sell well over 50%. So over half of the customers that your team sees in a year, if you're going to be tip of the spear, are purchasing a maintenance agreement from your company and your team members. Now, this absolutely requires continuous team training. Why should customers consider maintenance agreements? Well, warranty is impacted, performance is impacted, the system life is impacted, ongoing operating cost is impacted. There's a lot of reasons for the customers to consider a maintenance agreement. However, there's also a big reason why your company needs an ever-growing base of maintenance agreement customers. Maintenance agreement profits add 6 to 7 times their value to your company valuation. General profits and assets pale in comparison for increased valuation. A company, for example, with 5,000 maintenance agreements valued at $179 each, with this multiplier of 6 to 7 times their value applied, would be an added value to the company of over $5 million. That is significant when you are selling the company, when you have investors who are looking to invest in the company, when you're working with a banker or investor for expansion, or you're passing the baton to the next generation, and company valuation is part of that transaction. For residential application, particularly in HVAC, which is where a couple of these specific numbers are pulled from, the goal would be 1,000 maintenance agreements per $1 million in gross sales is the target that the top performing companies tend to hit. What about maintenance agreement efficiency? Early in the life of the company, we have taught our technicians that doing maintenance agreements meant one big thing. Things must be slow. The unfortunate byproduct of that is they continue to move slow and actually take too long. Technicians who take too long on a maintenance agreement can be costing the company thousands of dollars, right? So we have a little bit of a balancing act that we want to look at here. We don't want to take too long unless you are upselling an item. If you're adding to the ticket, carry on. But as much as you don't want to finish over the allotted time, technicians who finish early also are linked to a higher callback percentage because it shows a tendency to rush through the job. What about a KPI when it comes to advertising? Where lead closing percentages are broken down, there are significant differences between a general advertised lead and a relational lead. Let's look at these together. For general advertising, the close ratio is usually between 25 to 35%. If your closing rate on general advertised leads is higher than that percentage, I would encourage you to look at your pricing carefully. Usually a general advertised lead is a race to the bottom. 3 to 5 bids come in or more, and the customer doesn't know you. They really haven't worked with your company. They are usually just gathering a bunch of bids, and the dominant factor tends to be on price. Compared to customer referrals to your company have a much higher closing percentage. It's around 60% or higher for a referral to your company. Referrals from maintenance agreement customers have the highest closing percentage. 70% close rate or higher when someone who is a maintenance agreement customer with your company refers a friend to connect with you. Relationship leads always have the highest closing percentage. What about a KPI in terms of replacement quotes? When your technicians are out and about and they find older systems or poor performing system issues, 50% of the time or more, if a comfort consultant has to come out after the technician is gone to provide the quote, 50% of the time minimum, you want a quote to replace taking place. However, if the technician is able to give the quote, you want that to be 100% of the time when they find an older system or a system that is in poor condition. Something that we have noticed over the last few years, selling replacement systems, especially the top performing systems, starts 2 to 3 years in advance. So as the technician is out and they're taking care of the maintenance for a customer and they see the system is starting to get older, they begin to prepare the customer by letting them know system options that have changed since they replaced their system last. He begins to give them an idea of the investment level of a new system. He also lets them know that there are promotions and rebates and financing that are available. Utility rebates help to offset the initial cost of a new system. He lets them know that there are 7 definite reasons to consider a highly efficient system compared to a basic system. You get the idea. Now, the technicians, to do that effectively, have to be trained, because many technicians will tell you, nah, I'm not a salesperson. I'm just a technician. And that's wonderful. We don't want you to be anything other than who you are, because who you are is enough. You, as the industry expert, can begin to guide the customer toward a critical decision they will make. And the further you give them to do their research and to be prepared, you become the hero in that situation. How about a KPI for revenue per comfort consultant? Now, what's reasonable for your team? That's the real takeaway. The formula is based on desired gross sales amount, desired closing percentage, desired average sale amount, and the number of calls required annually to make that happen. So this really needs to be developed with your team. It's hard to get some carte blanche average because every market can be different, and you want to make sure that it's reasonable for your team. So here's an example. Your numbers may be higher or lower, and that's totally fine. But I'm going to say in my market, it is reasonable to have a gross sales target for a comfort consultant working full-time in HVAC where I live of $2 million in sales this year. Now, I want a closing percentage target of 50%, and I want the average ticket to be $9,500 or higher. Now, from these information, or these little bit of information right here, I can fill in the last 2 metrics. If I take 2 million in sales divided by an average ticket of 9,500, I discover that I have to see 422 clients. And because I'm at a 50% close rate, I have to close 211 deals at an average of 9,500 to be a $2 million man this year. Now, working with a local contractor not long ago, we go through this scenario and we get to the bottom, and he says to me, that's a problem. I said, which part? He said, well, several parts, but down here, I did not have one comfort consultant that saw that many customers last year. So we had to adjust the number they would see, the number they would close, the total sales amount, and the average sale. The good news is, because it was customized to their team, when the team saw the numbers, they were both energized. They were encouraged because they saw the pathway of how to achieve their goals. And last I heard, they are well on their way to making it happen. Here are some KPI company health check revenue metrics for you to consider. The first one is revenue per employee of the company. Now, the industry range is from 130,000 to 170,000. Therefore, a company with 5 people should be generating between 650,000 to 850,000. Patrick, how did you come up with that? That's 130 times 5 or 170 times 5. That is the range. Revenue per employee of the company. Okay? That is one health check that will let you see where you land against that national average. Here's another one. Revenue per service truck. 175,000 to 225,000 is your baseline. Okay? If you're above this, that's a wonderful thing. If you're below this, This is a bar to kind of measure yourself against. A company with 5 service trucks should be generating typically between $875,000 to $1 million or higher. Remember, this is not your lid. It is only a baseline of measurement. Now remember the old classic phrase, how do you eat an elephant? What if we took this big goal and we break it down into bite-sized pieces? If the goal were $225,000 of revenue generated per service truck in the company, here's how to work that math backward to show you how achievable steps need to take place every day. 225,000 divided by 240 working days is $937.50 that needs to be generated per day. $937.50 divided by 5 calls per day is $187.50 per call. That is a manageable metric. To your team, guys, we're already averaging 5 calls a day. Ask yourself, is my per call average over or under that amount? That in most markets is very, very achievable. So $187.50 over 5 calls a day, over 240 working days, guess what? There's my goal met of $225,000 per service truck. What about revenue per installer? $375,000 tends to be a baseline metric. Again, not a lid, just a baseline to compare and measure yourself to. If I take $375,000 divided by 240 working days in the course of a year, I need to be generating $1,562 of revenue per installer to hit this goal. If I break that down, for $1,562 per day over 5 days a week, here would be the question. Could an installer at my company install $7,800 worth of work in a week? Most markets and most companies, that would be a yes. You get the idea. You take the big number, the elephant, and you work the math backward so you get the fork-sized pieces of how to achieve this on a daily basis. Here's another company health check, assets to liability ratio. Now the target is to land between 2 and 3 or higher. If you're too low as a company, you're struggling to meet obligations and payroll. If you are higher, that's a good thing. Higher is healthier. You have money to invest and grow properly. So knowing that the target range is between 2 or 3, look at these companies shown below. Company number 1, current assets of $100,000, current liabilities of $110, current ratio is 0.91. Remember the goal? They are very low. That means that company is definitely struggling. Company 2, current assets of $194,000, current liabilities of $106. That's definitely better, but we're on the very low end of the range. So better than company 1, still really struggling. Company number 3, current assets of $270,000, current liabilities of $100,000. Now we are thoroughly in the upper middle of this range. Remember, as you do this with your company, if your numbers are low, you're struggling, but you already know that. Nobody has to tell you that. You're sensing that, you're feeling it. This will just kind of give you an idea where you land on this scale. Higher is healthier because it helps you achieve more of your company goals. Let's talk about a KPI for non-billable time. Non-billable time is many times the number one biggest expense for many companies in the trades industries. Non-billable time is simply hours that you pay field labor employees, but are not typically charged directly to the customer. This could include shop time, travel time, unless you bill port to port, company meetings, sick days, vacation time, holidays, even the 45-minute cup of coffee. Let's say that you did set aside some money for a company meeting, But you walk to the shop after it's over, and there's 3 of your top guys standing around the coffee pot 45 minutes after the meeting has concluded. Non-billable time adds up in a hurry. In fact, here are some typical averages. Among the trades industries, service technicians range between 40 to 55% in terms of non-billable time. Installation crews are better. They can range anywhere from 15 to 25% because they tend not to be as transient or mobile. They're not running to get parts. They go from the shop to the job site, so there's less moving around. Non-billable time is expensive. If you're not tracking it, it might be much higher than you think. So the goal for you is to beat these averages and manage non-billable time very, very carefully. So let's talk about a KPI in regards to markup versus margin. These are 2 of the most misunderstood terms in all of the combined industries that we work with. So markup calculation method shows profit as a percentage of the cost. Margin calculation method shows profit as a percentage of the sale. Now, why does that matter? It matters because both calculation methods will produce profit. But is it enough? Is it the dollar amount you were looking for? Not understanding the difference can literally cost you thousands of dollars. Let's go through an example. Our gross profit target percentage that we're going to want in these examples is 40%. So in our first example, I'm going to use the margin calculation method. The margin calculation method uses a divisor. I will show you how we come up with the divisor in just a moment. The cost of goods sold in our job example, or in our example here, this is not just one job. In our example here, cost of goods sold would be $300,000. Divided by 0.6 as my divisor would give me sales of $500,000. That is a gross profit of $200,000, which hits my desired profit target of 40%. However, what if I use a 40% markup? A markup is calculated using a multiplier. If I take the same cost of goods sold times 40% markup, notice my total sales number is very different. My gross profit dollar amount is very different. And my gross profit percentage is very different. This is something that is elusive to many contractors. That's why we wanted to include it, because you can use whichever calculation method you want. You just have to make sure it's generating what you are looking for in terms of your profit target. Let's look at markup. Again, the markup calculation method shows profit as a percentage of the cost. So if we use a 10% markup, we have a $1,000 job cost. A 10% markup would produce a selling price of $1,100. Now this is going to be worth somebody's trip to this course right here. There is a way to perform an audit on any job you ever do that is very quick, is very simple, and is very accurate to let you see what your profit percentage is on any given job. We simply take the profit on a job divided by the sell price. So in our example, we had $100 profit. The sell price was $1,100. That gives me a profit percentage of 9.09. A 10% markup produced a 9.09% gross profit percentage. Let's look at margin. Margin calculation method, remember, is where profit is shown as a percentage of the sell. So if I am using the margin calculation method, I said earlier that we use this calculation in the form of a divisor. Well, how do you determine what divisor you're supposed to use? It's actually pretty simple. Here's the formula. Take the number 1 minus the percentage of profit that is desired. So 1 minus 10% or 0.10 is how it would show up on a calculator. That's going to give you a divisor of 0.90 to use in this example. So $1,000 job cost, a 10% margin calculation, which uses my divisor of 0.90, produces a different sell price. Here it's $1,111. I use the same job audit. My profit, $111. My sell price, $1,111. You know what's coming. The profit here is a true 10%. Now, I know what probably at least one of you is thinking right now. Patrick, I mean, come on. That's barely 1% difference. Well, you're right, because our numbers here were very small. A 10% markup produced a 9.09% profit margin. Okay? That is a discrepancy of less than 1%. That's true. But a 40% markup produces only a 29% profit margin. That is a difference of 11%. That adds up to a lot of dollars in the course of a year. Now again, you can use whatever calculation method you want. You just have to make sure you are producing the end result that you're looking for. For example, if I want a 40% gross profit using a divisor, I would use 0.60. How do I know that? 1 minus 40% equals 0.60 on your calculator. If, however, I wanted to use a multiplier, it is not 1.4 that I would use. If I'm using a multiplier, I would use 1.667, which would then produce a 40% gross profit. Again, use whichever calculation method you prefer. Just make sure you are getting the end result you are seeking. So what about a KPI for dealer profitability? We know that we have to get pricing right to succeed. Over 70% of companies hit their first $1 million at a loss. Some of you may say, yep, been there, done that, right? So they're moving dollars. They're just not keeping many of those dollars. There's actually 3 stages of going out of business. The first one is where we give the speech, we just have to do more work. The number one response of business owners when they see a small bottom line is, we just have to do more work. Here's the problem with that. Notice the bucket of water. Is the answer to what you see on the screen putting more water in the bucket? Unfortunately, it's not. In fact, the real truth is, it doesn't matter how much more water you put in the bucket until you seal up all these gaps where you're leaking. Just doing more work will not fix the problem. Number 2, once we realize, well, you know what? We're doing more work, but we're not making much ground. Now you start putting personal savings back into the business. Sometimes business owners are given this piece of advice, and we're not big fans of this piece of advice. Well, just give the company a loan from you. I don't like that advice. If this is the state of your company, is one more loan the answer, no matter who it's from? Of course not. Then we get to DEFCON 3. We realize that doing more work is not turning the ship. We've put personal savings, which is nothing more than more water in the bucket, and it's not saving the day. So now we're taking out another mortgage on the house, maxing out a line of credit, selling excess inventory, and the tragedy is we now know that is not going to solve the problem. We have to explore where we are hemorrhaging profitability. Maybe our pricing is wrong. Our overhead is out of balance. On and on and on. Our cash flow is not properly managed. It could be any number of things. But these are 3 common stages of going out of business because none of these are effective long-term solutions. Now, there's something that is almost counterintuitive. There are actually 3 stages of growing out of business. The first one is when the owner moves from the field to the office. This is a celebrated time in the life of a company. It's also a very tricky time. When owners come from the field to the office, they normally don't increase their rates. The reason they don't is because they believe their presence is going to make the whole company lean and mean. They're going to be doing job audits. They're going to be quoting jobs and trimming the fat, if you will. And that's well intended. The problem is when they come from the field to the office, they are more accessible now than ever before. They're wearing 10,000 hats that they didn't even know existed. They're pulled in 500 different directions. So as a result, right in the middle of a celebrated time in the life of the company, the profit margin just slimmed up. Number 2, when gross sales land between $750,000 to about $1.2 million. Again, this is a celebrated time in the life of a small business owner. They have reached that first $1 million in gross sales. But remember, 70% of companies hit this mark losing money. This is an added consideration. When things are already tight, you begin to realize, boy, there's major infrastructure expansion that's taking place. You're adding people, vehicles, or replacing vehicles. Maybe you're replacing a database or a server. Now you have to upgrade your computers or iPads for the field service team. Maybe you're physically expanding your office space. And if you've already crossed over this first hurdle, be encouraged, tongue-in-cheek, to know it's coming again at about $2.5 million, a little over $5 million, around $7.5 million. Now, the interesting thing with most company owners, if you ask them to write out what they know they're going to need to succeed in the next 5 years, they will make you a very similar list. They know, well, we're going to have to upgrade our copier. We're going to have to replace computers. We're going to need 2 new trucks and 3 new field technicians and 2 new support staff and on and on and on. They actually have a pretty good idea. The problem is we know what we should do, but are we acting on it? We have to get tomorrow into today. If we don't get tomorrow into today, when tomorrow shows up, we aren't going to be prepared. And if we're not prepared for the things we know are coming to grow in the life of our business, it is going to shorten up the dollars and the profits and the ability to expand over the growth cycles of your company. Last but not least, any point of rapid expansion. Now, we define this as 15% or more in the course of 1 year can create significant cash flow issues. Let's say that you finally land a big job that's going to take place over weeks or months. And you've been waiting on a job like this because you felt like you would have really arrived and it puts you on the map. Well, you've arrived okay. But unfortunately, what you've arrived at is something you may not have planned for. With big jobs like that, you are paid from the people that you're doing the job for on a different schedule many times than you are paying your team members and your installers and your suppliers. So the income and the outflow are not on the same level of schedule. Now, if you've planned for that, you're good. Many times, companies don't plan for that, and right in the middle of a big job, a series of growth, it gets really, really tight. What is a KPI for revenue per billable hour? Revenue per billable hour for contractors who sell mainly base level products, no matter what that product is somewhere between $100 to $125. For contractors who sell mainly higher tier products, especially among the trades industries, HVAC in particular, their revenue per billable hour can land from $175 to north of $200. What you sell absolutely matters because what you sell and the level of what you sell will determine the profit, and the profit tends to go up the higher the service or product that you are providing. For example, In the course of a year, let's say that I sold 52 systems and they were all the basic system. In my just simple math example here, that would be around $109,000 of profitability. If, however, I sell some of the basic, a lot of the better, and some of the best, my profitability goes up significantly from $109,000 to $233,000. Your product mix impacts your profitability. So again, in looking at that revenue per billable hour and stretching that metric, if you offer options to choose from, it tends to increase profit dollars and your average ticket sell. Something that we have available at Grandy and Associates to help you with all of this is the Profit Smart KPI tracking tool. Now, because you are participating in this course, we want to give you an added benefit. You can find this tracking tool going to grandyassociates.com, looking in the product section. When you find the KPI profit tracker, if you are interested and like what you see, you can use the discount code PS25. That will give you 25% savings on this product. I think you'll like what you see, and it is specifically designed to help you manage a lot of these KPIs that we've looked at here in this first lesson. With that, it brings us to the end of this lesson for 6 power habits of top HVAC companies.